Well, let's talk to the RMT's General Secretary, Mick Lynch, who's live from the picket line outside Euston train station in London. Good morning to you.
Morning, Julia.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. So once again, these talks are broken down. Tell us where we've got to, though. What is the offer on the table right now that you're not happy with?
Well, I wouldn't describe them as broken down. We've been speaking to the companies this week and we'll speak to them next week, but we haven't got a solution to the problem. There are still big gaps between us. So in the train operating companies, we've had no offer on pay. They set out what they want to do, which includes closing all of the ticket offices on the railways in Britain. It means changing all of our members' terms and conditions, new contracts of employment that will be diluted compared to what we've got now. They want to take all the guards off the trains. Grant Shapps said the future is guardless trains, and we've had those disputes already in recent years, so we're going back the way, really. On Network Rail, we've had that offer of over 3 years, an 8% increase, but thousands of job cuts, changes to safety standards, and working conditions completely revised, which we think is detrimental. So we haven't got a solution to the problem. We've still got issues, but I think at the heart of this is the inability of the companies to negotiate freely because of the rhetoric that's coming out of Grant Shapps, who seems to be desperate to create this image that he's some kind of machismo minister and take on the unions and make us an enemy, make me an enemy and the other trade unions and my members enemies. We're just ordinary men and women who are trying to get a decent deal.
Wait a minute, isn't it Grant Shapps'
positions, perhaps we could get one.
But Mick Lynch, isn't it Grant Shapps' point as Transport Secretary that he's not involved in these negotiations and it's up to the train operating companies Network Rail? Yeah, I accept that at the end of the day, any money for pay is going to come from taxpayers. So.
Yeah, but on Saturday, Julia, he said directly to the Daily Mail, and it was highly featured, that he's going to issue redundancy notices to everyone in the train operating companies and have guardless trains. In the documents and the agreements he's got with the train operating companies, he's directly responsible for industrial relations, and he can dictate the terms that they offer. He's completely embedded into this dispute, while he claims that he's not.
What I think a lot of rail passengers will be concerned about, and people who are impacted by the rail strikes, by more traffic on the roads, and people who may be losing customers and the like, is you say the talks haven't broken down and they're ongoing. Why then do you have to hold another strike day today and on Saturday, affecting people over really important travel times for a lot of people? Why can't you just carry on with the talks? What's the point of another strike day? What will that achieve?
Well, we need to strengthen our hand in those talks. These dates were set down. We've always put a big gap between any of the action, so we're not rushing headlong into action. But our members don't want the momentum to come out of the dispute. They want to keep the pressure on the companies. That's part of our negotiation tactics. The companies use tactics against us, such as issuing redundancy notices, Section 188 letters, that if we don't respond to those will be implemented, and an unknown amount of people, which will be in excess of 5,000, maybe 8,000 people, will lose their jobs on the railway. So we're responding to essentially to threats.
Well, you say that's a threat, Ms Lynch, but the reality is we've had a railway which has been bailed out to the tune of £16 billion by taxpayers. Look, it's not the railway workers' fault that their railways were basically shut down for 18 months or so, but nevertheless, that's reality. People are working from home.
Well, the railways weren't shut down, Julia. Not shut. Ran all the way through the pandemic.
They ran the whole time, but there was no one on the trains, which is why they weren't making any money. But the point is, people are working from home now, or they're working part-time in the office, part-time at home. They're not using the railways as it is. Of course there are going to be redundancies. Why do you think that railways are any different to any other organisation?
Well, what we said is that there should be no compulsory redundancies, and we understand the changes in technology.
But why shouldn't there be compulsory redundancies if those staff aren't needed?
Well, if you let me finish, I'll tell you. We'll work through the problems that they've got and we'll get a negotiated settlement finally. It is a reasonable demand that for a process of change and reorganisation, we should not have compulsory redundancies. I know, because they've told me face to face, that we can achieve that. It's just a question of what price we have to pay to achieve it. So it's a whole package of measures. It's change to working practices, change to technology, changes to the numbers of people working in the industry, and we need a change to the pay structure because we haven't had a pay deal. And like everyone else, our members are struggling with their bills. We will get there, Julia, in the end, And we could have got there quicker if we didn't have such a provocative and militant stance from Mr. Shapps and the government. And they're trying to prove some kind of credentials that they're going to attack organised labour and workers in this country, change the laws, clamp down on the ability of people to express them. All of that's entirely unacceptable, but my job is to get a deal for my people, and I'm determined to do that, and I will work with those managers and senior executives to create that deal. But he's got to create an environment where we can do that.
OK, look, there's no doubt at all there'll be many people in this country, and the polls have shown this, who actually are very supportive of what you're doing. I've got an issue with the fact that you have the power through the particular jobs that your members do to basically hold the nation to ransom, when it's, you know, it's got nothing to do with most of the rail passengers.
Anyone, Julia,
no, but I'm just saying...
That's just a cliche.
I do answer, but let me finish. The net effect of you going on strike that has a massive impact on other people who aren't involved in that dispute. Those rail passengers, we don't have a single say over whether or not what pay rise you get. But there'll be many, many people who are very supportive of the fact that you are trying to get a pay rise for your members. That it's not just a pay rise, it's actually just not a massive pay cut, which is what most people are facing right now with 10.1% inflation. But do you see the other side of the argument from Mr. Macho Grant Shapps, as you call him, is the fact that if they give that pay rise, agree to that pay rise for railway workers, they also then have to agree to a pay rise over inflation for the NHS workers, 1 million of them, for all teachers, hundreds of thousands of them, all civil servants, everybody. The country would be bankrupt at that point. We can't afford it. It's taxpayers who would pay that cost. Do you understand that if they give in to you, that means everybody gets a 10% pay rise and the country can't afford it?
Well, yeah, I mean, that sounds like that's the case. But what actually happened in this case, Julia, is 2 years ago they came to us with this plan when inflation was very low, about 1%. And they wanted to make these cuts before the Ukraine war and before the hike in fuel prices, which is stoking inflation. So this plan is a long-term plan, and he's cut £4 billion out of funding. He's cut £2 billion off London Underground and £2 billion off the mainline railway. That's the heart of the problem.
But after £16 billion of funding?
Yeah, but £16 billion of funding didn't go to us. It went to the railway companies. And out of that £16 billion last year, they extracted £500 million of profit direct to their shareholders.
Yep.
So the taxpayer is subsidising First Group, Go Ahead, Arriva, and the national railways of France, Italy and Germany through subsidy to those companies to run their railway. So there is an absolutely ridiculous structure to the railway where subsidy goes to other railway companies outside the UK and goes to private sector profiteers and subcontractors, while railway workers are being screwed to the floor. We can't accept that. The duty of a union is to secure jobs and get their members decent terms and conditions. I don't want to disrupt anyone. We live in these communities. The people that are being disrupted are our friends, colleagues and relatives.
Okay. Can I ask you
we rely on. We want a settlement to this dispute as soon as we can get it, and we're working towards
Well, I know certainly everyone else does. More strikes, not just today, but Saturday as well, no doubt in the future. Can I ask you about something else that was in the news over the last week or so? You suggested that the EU influence and Ukrainians, quote, playing with Nazi imagery were partly responsible for the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Do you stand by those remarks?
Well, that's a selective quote, and it's not the full story, and I don't blame the Ukrainians at all for the invasion. The blame for the invasion is with Russia. It's an unnecessary aggression. It's illegal. It's unwarranted. There's no justification for it. And Putin is at the source of that with his corrupt regime. What needs to happen now is that Russia needs to halt their aggression. They need to remove themselves from all of the territory of the Ukraine. The Ukrainian people have the right to live in freedom and liberty under their own sovereignty. And that's our position of me and our union.
I'm glad you've clarified that. Just finally, also, it's A-level results day, also B-Techs and T-levels as well. Millions of youngsters and their families having quite a stressful morning. We're going to be talking to some students in a few moments' time, opening their results. What advice would you give your 18-year-old self, or asking our audience what advice they would give their 18-year-old self on this sort of day? What advice would you give 18-year-old Mick Lynch?
Well, 18-year-old Mick Lynch had been at work for 2 years by then, Julia. I was doing an apprenticeship. But take the opportunities, use the education services. We need a properly funded education, and enjoy your education and get the most out of it. Don't be obsessed by career planning, is my advice. You need to broaden your horizons for education and see where you end up. you don't want to be too rigid in planning your life, is my view.
You could end up General Secretary of the RMT.
Like you, Julia. Exactly. Take the opportunities when they come along, but try to enjoy your life and not be put in a straitjacket of career planning.